The babe vanished. Abrogation abandoned her neatly bankrupt clothes on the coffer by the waterfall. 2 years of analytic yielded no answers. But the abhorrent accuracy was revealed on a backing morning on June 12, 2023. A back fisherman on the Cape Fur River spotted an animal skull ashore in the roots of an old oak timberline on a sandbar. But to accept how it all happened, we charge to go back to the summer of 2021 when a 23-year-old apprentice went hiking in the mountains of North Carolina and was never apparent animate again. Courtney Miller Brashasse at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She was amorous about ecology, often participated in apprentice expeditions, and loved spending time in nature. Her friends declared her as airy and open, but sometimes too trusting. Courtney aggregate allowance in a student dormitory with an acquaintance called Sarah, who knew her bigger than anyone else. On the morning of July 16, 2021, Courtney told Sarah that she was planning to spend the weekend at Pasa National Park, about a 3-hour drive from campus. She capitaled to aggregate bulb samples for her Appalachian cardboard on the aftereffect of soil acidity on moss growth. She planned to stay one night affected abreast Rainbow Falls and Acknowledgement on Monday. In her backpack, she had a dejected Coleman sleeping bag she had bought after most year, a camping tent, a gas burner, canned food, a canteen of water, and a bulb accumulating kit. Courtney brought her Apple iPhone 12 in an Atramentis case and a carriageable charger. She was cutting Atramentis Morel hiking boots, jeans, and a blooming anorak with a university logo. According to corpuscle phone operators, Courtney's buzz last connected to a corpuscle belfry on Friday evening about 7:30 p.m. Back, she was already in the Esplanade area. GPS showed her location abreast the parking lot at the start of the aisle to the waterfall. After that, the arresting disappeared. When Courtney did an appearance up at the university on Tuesday morning and didn't answer her phone, Sarah contacted campus security. By Wednesday, the Henderson County Badge Administration had abutting the search. They began her car, a white 2018 Honda Civic, in the parking lot at the park entrance. The car was locked, and the keys were beneath the advanced attic mat on the driver's ancillary breadth. Courtney usually hid them. In the trunk, police found an abandoned bulb sample bag and a university jacket, which the babe had apparently taken off because of the heat. There was annihilation apprehensive in the car. The money in her wallet was untouched, and her abstracts were still there. The chase affair consisted of 12 volunteers from the Bounded Mountain Rescue account and 4 badge officers. They combed the breadth about the waterfall oral a 5 kilometers radius. The aisle to the avalanche is well marked and passes through a budding forest of oak and ache trees. It takes about 2 hours to airing to the waterfall. Rainbow Falls is an avalanche about 30 m aerial that falls into a baby lake. The baptize in the basin is clear, but the abyss reaches 8 m in the center. The basal is rocky and the accepted is weak. From the lake, the river continues bottomward through a rocky gorge. On the 3rd day of the search, rescuers begin Courtney's covering set up a 100 meters from the basin coffer in a small clearing. The covering was properly pitched and secured. Central was an unzipped sleeping bag, a hiking backpack with clothes, and an abandoned baptize bottle. A gas burner stood abutting to the covering on a flat rock, but had not been used. Footprints in the bendable arena abreast the tent showed that Courtney had walked between the affected and the basin coffer at the basal of the avalanche several times. The had measurement of the aisle akin her shoes. But at the water's edge, the footprints became duplicate due to the bouldered arena and connected spray from the falling water. On the shore near the waterfall, rescuers began a towel and bodice, neatly bankrupt on a large basement abroad from the spray. It looked as if Courtney had bared a swim in the basin beneath the waterfall. Her hiking boots were adjacent with her socks tucked central as she usually did at home. Searchers combed the absolute basin below the avalanche with underwater equipment. Divers arrested every inch of the bottom, looking beneath every basement and in every crevice. They begin no body, no clothes, no items acceptance to Courtney. The current in the basin was anemic due to its size. So, if the babe had drowned, her body should accept remained at the bottom or floated to the apparent oral a few days. The accomplishment operation lasted 2 weeks. Searchers surveyed every trail within a 10 kilometers ambit and arrested all the caves and crevices in the rocks. A helicopter with a thermal imager flew over the breadth several times. Sniffer dogs followed all accessible routes, but lost the aisle at the basin coffer below the waterfall. The badge questioned everyone who was in the Esplanade that weekend. The Esplanade forester saw a Honda Civic in the parking lot on Friday evening, but did not bethink the exact time. An accumulation of 4 tourists anesthetized by the avalanche on Saturday morning about 10 a.m., but did not accommodate anyone. Addition Brace with children was at the avalanche on Saturday afternoon, and additionally did not see anyone. Detective Mark Rodriguez, who led the case, appropriate that Courtney may accept slipped on the wet rocks near the avalanche and collapsed into the river below the lake. The accepted is strong there, abnormally afterwards the rains that fell on Thursday before her disappearance. Perhaps the anatomy was carried afterwards aloft the search area. Board arrested other versions as well. They studied Courtney's amusing media accounts and interviewed her company and teachers. The babe had no enemies, debts, or problems that could explain her disappearance. Her ex-boyfriend, Alex, lived in addition accompaniment and was at work on the day of her disappearance, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Courtney's family assassin, a clandestine investigator, and even a psychic, but to no avail. The girl's mother, Linda Miller, came to the park every weekend and distributed flyers with her daughter's photo. Her father, Robert Miller, organized a group of volunteers who connected the search for addition ages afterwards the official end of the operation. By September 2021, the case had been classified as missing. The badge occasionally accustomed reports that addition had a parent, a babe resembling Courtney in assorted cities in North Carolina, but none of these letters were confirmed. In the winter of that year, heavy rains acquired calamity on the Cape Fur River. The baptizakin rose 2 m above normal. In the bounce of 2022, the flooding recurred and was alike stronger than before. The baptize breakable the banks, uprooted trees, and afflicted the course of the river in abounding places. Fisherman Jim Parker and his son Tommy arrived at the Cape Fur River Aboriginal in the morning on June 12, 2023. They planned to angle for trout in a quiet estuary beneath the old bridge. It had rained all night, and the river was swollen, accustomed branches and debris. Around 8 o'clock in the morning, Tommy noticed article whitish shore in the roots of a collapsed oak timberline on the Shaw. At first, he anticipation it was a allotment of plastic or an old bottle, but aback he looked closer, he accomplished it was a bone. Jim came after piece and immediately recognized an animal skull. They called the badge appropriate away. The Aboriginal to arrive at the arena were convoying officers from Cumberland County. They cordoned off the breadth with chicken band and called in investigators. By noon, a accomplished aggregation was alive by the river. Detectives, argumentative experts, photographers, and divers found the draft of the basic 10 m from the shore beneath a snag at the basal of the river. The skeleton was about complete. The basic lying in a addle blue sleeping bag. The bolt of the sleeping bag had angry to rags afterwards 2 years in the water, but the attachment and metal parts were still intact. The skeletal remains were captivated in a attenuate white sheet which had about completely decomposed. Remnants of a chicken nylon braiding hung from the wrists anchored in the bones. A red brick was angry to the anxiety with the same rope. The knots were simple but strong. Medical examiner Dr. Elizabeth Chin brushed the charcoal appropriate where they were found. She anon noticed a gold acme on the high larboard mare. According to her, the acme was relatively new, excepting been placed no more than 5 years ago. This was the first clue to identification. The bones were taken to the morgue for detailed examination. Dr. Chin formed with the remains for 3 days, recording every detail. Based on the action of the bones and teeth, she bent that the victim was a woman amid the ages of 20 and 25, about 165 centimeters tall. Dental Annal accepted her identity. The gold acme had been adapted to Courtney Miller in 2019. Afterwards, she injured her tooth arena volleyball. The girl's parents articulate the remains by this acme and by the distinctive jaw arrangement that was visible in adolescence photographs. Now it was an official annihilation case. Detective Mark Rodriguez, who had searched for Courtney 2 years ago, was again arched the investigation. This time he had an absolutely different picture of the incident. Dr. Chin apparent a able at the base of the skull on the back of the head. The able was not acquired by decomposition or accident in the water, but by a able draft with a blunt object. The attributes of the injury indicated that the draft was delivered from aloft while the victim was in a horizontal position. There were marks on the cervical base indicating strangulation. The hyoid cartilage was broken, which occurs aback the throat is severely compressed. These injuries occurred before afterlife because there were no signs of healing at the edges of the fractures. Assay of the pelvic bones showed signs of animal assault. Dr. Chin found microfractures on the pubic bones, which are acquired by forced penetration. These injuries also occurred anon before death. The rope used to tie Courtney's easily and feet was an accepted nylon account braiding sold at any accoutrement store. The brick was also an accepted red brick acclimated in construction. It had no appropriate markings or architect stamps. The breadth in which the anatomy was wrapped was a white, deeply alloyed cotton fabric. Based on the fibers, experts determined that it was boilerplate quality bedding that could be purchased at most stores. No different arrangement or traces of laundry bactericide remained. The remains were begin about 2 kilometers afterwards from Rainbow Falls. Considering the acceleration of the accepted and the time the anatomy had spent in the water, board affected that it had been befuddled anon from the waterfall, Detective Rodriguez alternate to the waterfall with a new aggregation of forensic experts. They searched for any traces of the abomination that they ability except absent 2 years earlier. At that time, they thought they were attractive for a missing girl, not an annihilation scene. Several stains that could accept been blood were begin on the rocks about the waterfall. 2 years of rain and snow had done away most of the traces, but some remained in the abysmal cracks in the rock. The samples were beatific for analysis. The analysis showed that 2 of the samples were indeed animal blood. The DNA akin that of Courtney Miller taken from her toothbrush, which was stored in her dorm room. The claret stains were begin at the edge of the cliff, the best convenient place to bandy an anatomy into the water. Investigators additionally begin bolt remnants caught on a siculate basement ledge. The fibers were dejected and akin the agreement of Courtney's sleeping bag. This confirmed the approach that the anatomy had been thrown from this breadth captivated in a sleeping bag. Now the account of the abomination became clearer. Addition attacked Courtney near her camp, hit her on the head, strangled her, raped her. Afresh captivated her anatomy in a sleeping bag and sheet, angry it with rope, absorbed a brick, and threw it off the avalanche to asphyxiate the evidence. But important questions remained. Who did it? How did the perpetrator end up in the aforementioned abode as Courtney? Why did they choose her? And best importantly, why did it booty so connected to acquisition the body? Detective Rodriguez brushed the search reports from 2021. Divers thoroughly searched the lake below the waterfall, but did not check the river below. They anticipation that if Courtney had collapsed into the water, the current would not accept been strong enough to haversack the anatomy so far. But the killer knew the river better. He understood that an anatomy with a weight tied to it would bore to the basal and get ashore in one of the underwater karst head pockets that had formed in the limestone bedrock. There, the anatomy could lie for years until a able flood done it out of its ambuscade place. Rodriguez accomplished, he was ambidextrous with a bent who knew the area well. This was not an accidental tourist or a casual maniac. The being who killed Courtney had brushed the breadth and knew the characteristics of the current and the basal relief. Investigators aggregate an account of everyone who could accept had such knowledge. It included bounded residents, park employees, guides who took tourists to the waterfall, fishermen who frequented the area, and anybody who had alternate in the chase for Courtney 2 years earlier. In parallel with the assay at the crime scene, detectives began a live on digital evidence. Courtney's buzz was never found, but the batch had abstracts on her calls and letters accustomed from her cell buzz provider in 2021. At the time, this abstracts did not attract attention because in the aftermost days before her disappearance, Courtney had only announced with a budding company and family. But now, board have studied the annal added carefully and discovered letters that were beatific to her buzz afterwards she disappeared. On July 15th, the day before her cruise to the park, Courtney accustomed a message from an alien number. "I care. I'll delay for you. You're not alone." The babe did not respond to this bulletin and did not even open it, anticipation by the marks in the system. Addition bulletin came on July 17th about Courtney was already in the park. "I apperceive breadth you are. Don't be afraid." And a third bulletin on July 18th, Saturday morning. "I'm close. See you soon." The Buzz Cardinal from which the messages were beatific was registered beneath a fake name and purchased with banknote at a cell phone Abundance in Hendersonville, 30 kilometers from the park. The store's surveillance cameras did not record the transaction, but the salesperson remembered the buyer. According to her, he was a man in his 30s, of boilerplate acme and build, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. He paid in banknote and did not accord his real name. The agent did not remember any appropriate appearance, as they had a bounding barter like him. Investigators traced the use of this number. The aftermost time it was acclimated was on Sunday evening, July 19th, about in the Passage Esplanade area. Afterwards the phone was angry off and never angry on again. But the best important clue was the assay of the messages. Digital forensics experts brushed not only the altercation but additionally the metadata. It turned out that the letters were not sent from adaptable Buzz, but via the Internet appliance of appropriate application. The IP abode from which the messages were beatific belonged to the Connect Internet Bistro in the Chapel Hill University District, a 10-minute walk from the dormitory breadth Courtney lived. This meant that the sender knew where she brash and lived. Detective Rodriguez went to the Internet cafe and battened to the owner. The cafe was accessible 24 hours a day and mainly served acceptants who were advancing for exams or alive on projects. There were no CCTV cameras and no annal of users were kept. But the buyer remembered that on the canicule aback Courtney's messages were sent. An adolescent man who was not a student came to the bistro several times. He consistently sat bottomward at a computer in the far corner, formed for about 20 minutes, and left. He paid in cash and didn't talk to anyone. The buyer of the Internet Bistro gave a description of the visitor who could accept beatific the messages to Courtney, an adolescent man in his 30s, thin with aphotic hair, consistently wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He came backward in the evening aback there were few bodies in the cafe and approved not to attract attention. Detective Rodriguez showed the buyer photos of all the men in Courtney's amphitheater who had been interviewed 2 years earlier. Among them were classmates, teachers, doormates, and acquaintances. The cafe owner did not admit any of them. The investigators afresh broadened their search. They requested lists of everyone who lived in the area, formed nearby, or frequented the university campus. They paid accurate absorption to those who might accepted Courtney abandoned, but were not amid her abutting friends. The list included the name of Travis Hargrove, a 27-year-old man who had worked for 2 years as a bagman for a company that served the university. He delivered appointment supplies, textbooks, and accessories to assorted departments, including biology, breadth Courtney studied. Hargrove lived in a busy adaptation, a 15-minute airing from campus. Neighbors described him as a quiet and withdrawn person who hardly socialized with anyone. He formed on weekdays and spent his weekends at home or driving somewhere in his old car. When detectives arrested his background, they found an absorbing coincidence. In 2020, Hargrove helped acceptants move from one dormitory to another. Among them was Courtney, who was effective her belongings afterwards renovations in the old building. Courtney's acquaintance, Sarah, remembered this adventure when investigators showed her a photo of Hargrove. According to her, he helped carry boxes and was actual alert to Courtney, allurement questions about her studies and hobbies. The babe was polite, but kept her distance. After the move, Hargrove appeared near the abode several added times under various pretexts. Sometimes he brought some documents. Sometimes he said he had forgotten the apparatus afterwards the move. Courtney was affronted by this and asked Sarah to say she wasn't home. The detectives began the buyer of the Internet Bistro and showed him Hargrove's photo again. This time the man looked more carefully and said that he resembled a approved company who came in the evenings. He wasn't 100% sure, but the resemblance was noticeable. On June 25, 2023, detectives obtained a Chase accreditation for Hargrove's apartment. Aback they accustomed at the address. It angry out that the man had moved out in December of aftermost year without abrogation a new address. The landlord said that Harov had been a neat addressee who consistently paid on time. But in contempo months, he had become nervous and suspicious. He consistently asked if anyone had appeared attractive for him, and often looked out the window aback he heard footsteps on the stairs. There was almost annihilation larboard in the apartment. Hargrove had taken all his personal belongings, but argumentative experts found several absorbing details. In the bathroom, abaft a pipe, there was a piece of chicken nylon braiding about a meter long. The aforementioned braiding was begun on Courtney's remains. A palm-sized allotment of white bolt was lying on the attic in the closet. An assay showed that the fabric was identical in agreement and weaved to the breadth in which the girl's body had been wrapped. These allegations were sufficient to affair an arrest warrant. The chase for Hargrove connected for a month. He did not accept an official job, did not hire adaptation in his name, and did not use coffer cards. But in early July, his car was spotted on camera abreast a gas base in the boondocks of Asheville, 100 kilometers from the abomination scene. The batch set up surveillance of all gas stations and cabin in the area. On July 3rd, Hargrove was arrested at a cheap cabin on the outskirts of Asheville. He was active there beneath a false name, advantageous in banknote, and hardly ever abrogation his room. Hargrove did not resist arrest. In his car, they found remnants of chicken rope, absolutely the same as the braiding acclimated to bind Courtney's hands and feet. In his haversack were a tourist map of the avalanche breadth and photos of Courtney, which he had apparently taken secretly during the trip. During the Aboriginal interrogation, Hargrove remained bashful and accepted a lawyer. But a backboard showed him the after effects of the braiding and fabric tests. As able-bodied as photos from the crime scene, he began to get nervous. His lawyer brushed him to a bet with the investigation. During the additional claiming on July 8th, Hargrove fabricated a partial confession. He said that he was indeed in adulation with Courtney and had been following her, but had not planned to kill her. According to his adaptation of events, it all happened accidentally during an argument. But investigators did not accept this version. Too many details acicular to a advised crime. The letters he beatific to the girl, the purchase of a buzz and addition Elsa's name, the braiding and brick he took with him to the forest. Detective Rodriguez applied psychological pressure. He declared to Hargrove in detail how the investigation was proceeding, what affirmation had been found, and explained that he had no chance of alienated punishment. It would be bigger to acquaint the accomplished accuracy and get a adventitious to accomplish a accord with the prosecution. On July 11th, Hargrove broke bottom ward and gave a bounding confession. He said that he fell in adulation with Courtney at Aboriginal afterimage aback he moved. The babe was affable and beautiful, but she showed no adventurous absorption in him. Hargrove began to chase her, brash her schedule, and memorize the places she frequented. He abstruse about her passion for hiking and biology. Aback he realized that Courtney was planning to go to the waterfall alone. He absently that this was his chance. Anniversary of Courtney's trip, he went to the waterfall, studied the area, and chose a abode to lie in wait. Hargrove knew that the babe was unlikely to accede to a accord with him, so he planned to force her into intimacy and afresh annihilate her so that she could not analyze him. He bought a phone and beatific Courtney several messages to alarm her and accomplish her feel vulnerable. Hargrove capital her to be an accompaniment of accent aback he appeared and offered his help. On Friday evening, July 16th, he collected to the Esplanade in his car and hid it in the Dupe abroad from the Capitol Road. He spent the night in the woods watching Courtney's affected through binoculars. In the morning, he waited until she undressed and entered the water. Hargrove attacked the babe as she was coming out of the lake. At first, he tried to actuate her to be intimate, saying that he admired her and that they were meant for anniversary other. Courtney was frightened, started screaming, and tried to run away. Afresh he hit her on the head with a rock. The babe fell, but was still conscious. Hargrove angry her hands with a braiding he had brought with him, dragged her into the Dupe abroad from the trail, and raped her. Afterwards he strangled her, binding her throat with his hands. To get rid of the body, Hargrove captivated it in a breath he had taken from his apartment, a fresh in Courtney's sleeping bag. He angry a brick, which he had additionally brought with him, to her anxiety and threw the anatomy off the bend of a waterfall, acquisitive that it would be agitated abroad by the current. He left Courtney's covering and belongings untouched to accomplish it, attending like an accident. He threw her buzz into a deep crevice in the rock's breadth it could not be found. He austere his clothes, which could accept had traces of claret on them, in the forest. Hargrove was confident that the anatomy would never be found because he had brashed the river's currents and knew about underwater pockets breadth abundant altar could get stuck. He did not apprehend that 2 years later the flood would be so able that it would ablution the charcoal out of their hiding place. On August 25, 2023, a board found Travis Hargrove accusable of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. The adjudicator bedeviled him to activity in prison after the achievability of parole. Courtney's parents abounding all the cloister hearings. Afterwards, the verdict was handed down. The girl's mother told reporters that amends had finally prevailed, but that it would not bring their babe back. The ancestors planned to set up an armamentarium to advise abomination victims and their families. The Courtney Miller case is an example of how avant-garde analytic techniques and the chain of board can solve alike crimes that assume unsolvable. Thanks to agenda affirmation and forensic science, the analgesic was begin 2 years after the crime. Detective Rodriguez accustomed an award from the Badge administration for his outstanding assignment in analytic the case. In an interview, he said that the most difficult affair was not to lose hope during those 2 years back. No one knew what had happened to Courtney. But he always believed that the accuracy would come out eventually, or